get the audio going here. All right, here we go. So I decided to put together this little live video as a public service announcement because, as many of you already know, I practice criminal defense and family law. Been doing it now since 2001 in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County and all over the state. But now that we're under these very strange and new circumstances, I'm fielding a lot of questions from people through phone calls, texts, and direct messages about how their time sharing, alimony, and child support is affected by the quarantine. So I pulled some of the administrative orders off the Supreme Court of Florida's website so that I could go through this with anybody that might have questions about how this quarantine will affect your parental responsibility, your parenting plan, and time sharing. I could start off with real world examples. Specifically, had a client call the other day and explained to me that her ex-husband believes that this is a holiday, and their parenting plan says that if the Monday following his weekend with his children is a holiday, he gets to keep the kids for that holiday. So she called me and she said, what do I do? My ex-husband won't return the children. He insists that this is a holiday because the kids got off school on a Friday, and then on Monday they were in quarantine with their dad. So the first thing that I had to tell her was that the parenting plan has to be followed in the way that it is written. So if it's unclear, then it's subject to interpretation. And if it's subject to interpretation, that means it's definitely subject to a fight. The second problem is that getting in front of a judge during this quarantine is very difficult. None of the judges are handling non-emergency matters in person. They're handling them either on the phone or through Zoom, and you have to understand those apps and that process in order to get before a judge. Something else you should know. The parenting plan has to be followed without any oversight. That means that because we can't get in front of a judge now, or we can't get in front of a judge quickly, everybody has to cooperate. So it's important for the person who is acting poorly or misbehaving or taking advantage to know that the judges are going to slam these parents when we get back to regular working hours. Oh, so I have a question. Let's see who's asking. Christina, let me know if you had something specific you wanted to ask, and congratulations for being out of it at this point. Okay, so here's what I can tell you about parenting plans and visitation. I'm going to go through the administrative order, so if I'm looking over you, it's because I'm reading it on my computer. So here's what we need to know. Time sharing. Pursuant to all current final judgments, temporary orders, settlement agreements, or other orders of the court awarding parental responsibility or time sharing, continued adherence to all orders by all parties is expected. So again, the person that's going to misbehave, the person that's going to automatically make unilateral decisions with respect to how this affects time sharing, that parent is going to have to answer to the judge. And I can tell you that all of the judges, at least in Broward County, are going to pay very close attention to this issue. And sanctions are allowed by this administrative order, so expect to pay if you're the one misbehaving. Okay. If there's already a court order that supersedes or this particular order, it would stay in place with respect to visitation. And here is a specific answer to the question about time sharing and whether or not this is a holiday. The Supreme Court said, and the administrative order dictates, that it's as if we're in school. So, for example, regular time sharing, as set forth in your parenting plan, will continue until the last day of school as designated in that parenting plan. If school has ended classes for the 19 and 20 school year prior to the date designated in the school's official calendar, they have not, the parties shall continue regular time sharing as though school were still in session until the date designated as the last day of school in the 1920 official school calendar. Then summertime sharing shall be as set forth in your parenting plan or applicable court order. School is not canceled. The calendar hasn't changed. We're just learning at a distance. So everybody needs to understand that your parenting plan controls until the end of the school year because the calendar hasn't changed. This is not a holiday. So your regular time sharing plan as though school were in session should control. All right, with respect to drop-offs and pickups, some of you unfortunately can't get along with each other, so you have to subject the children to being dropped off at police stations, which is terrible because then the kids grow up scared of cops. So let's try not to do that. Let's try to get along. But in any event, drop-offs and pickups. If you can't agree on drop-off and pickups, it has to be at the police or fire station closest to the child's school. I've had many cases where the parents can't agree on which police station they should take the kids to. Mom wants to drop off at the police station close to her house. Dad wants to drop off at the police station close to his house. It doesn't matter that they're both 9 minutes apart from one another, but this is what happens. So if you can't agree, it has to be at the police station closest to the children's school. Let's see. Okay. This goes back to the situation where one of the parents claims this is a holiday and therefore he's keeping the children. Not only will the court sanction that parent, impose costs, fees against that parent, but will also give makeup time to the other parent. So if you're taking more time than you're allowed to have and you're interpreting this parenting plan in the light most favorable to you, and if a court would disagree, be prepared to pay and also be prepared to give back your time sharing to the other parent. So if you take 10 days you're not supposed to have, the other parent gets that 10 days back later, and you have to agree on that on your own because the judges don't want to be dealing with all of this stuff when we get back. So if they're forced to, then expect to pay even more. Okay. If you're in a situation where we can't move, if the governor says you're sheltering in place, you can't even be on the street, it becomes impractical, impossible, and maybe even illegal to engage in time sharing where you have to leave the house and drop the children. Under this circumstance, and we're not there yet, so this is very important, but under this circumstance, the parent with the most overnights in the parenting plan will keep the children, regardless of what the parenting plan says. So if we're in a shelter in place where we can't leave the house for any reason other than an emergency, there will be no time sharing. The parent with the most overnights keeps the kids during that period, and then make up time when we get back to regular life will be afforded the parent who didn't have the children during the quarantine. So that's huge. And again, that's something that the parties have to work out amongst yourselves because the judges aren't going to want to be babysitters when we get back to regular court. I'm telling you, they're going to be slamming people, so don't take advantage. All right, let's see what else. Anything else? The courts aren't closed. We just can't go. So this is the last point for today on family law. We can get in front of a judge. So if there's something going on, if it's an emergency, oh, by the way, this is something else that most people don't realize. What you think is an emergency in family law is not an emergency to the judge. The only emergency to a judge is that a child is in imminent danger of neglect or abuse. That's an emergency to the court, nothing else. So if you have an emergency, we can get in front of a judge. If it's not an emergency, then we can still do it, but it's by Zoom. So most of the judges are handling motion calendar or special set hearings by Zoom. Download that app, get familiar with it. Basically, the court will send you a link that you click on and you join the court's meeting, if you will. You've got to be available 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after. The court will give all the instructions once we do it. You have to have your own notary. We can talk about that later because that's a whole nother situation. But we can get in front of a judge through Zoom for pre-trial issues. The courts aren't having trials on Zoom or by phone. And I wouldn't want to either. I think that would have to be done in person. One other thing before I go, and this has not necessarily to do with family law, it has to do with criminal law. Hold on. Donatello, stop licking. It's the dog. Dade County is allowing criminal depositions to be done by Zoom or by phone. Broward County is not participating in that at all. Awaiting further clarification on what's going to happen with that. So some of us will get back to you when we get that information. In the meantime, if you have any other questions about family law, I'm going to probably be doing this more often because it's easier for me to just do this once than field 7 million questions, although I welcome them, especially since we have nothing to do right now. But if you have any questions about this specifically or about family law or about how the quarantine affects you or your parenting plan. Child support and alimony, keep paying. Keep paying because you're not going to be able to establish that this is a permanent situation and that is required for a modification. So if you're willfully refusing to pay, meaning you have the money and you're not paying, be prepared to get slammed. If you truly have a situation where you work paycheck to paycheck like most people, and you simply don't have the money, you better make a note of it and you better be able to prove it because you're not entitled to a modification, at least not yet. So I would maintain status quo on alimony and child support as well. And then depending upon how things progress and how long this goes, we can readdress those issues when we get back to regular life. So status quo is the tip of the day. DM me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow or the next day. Ciao.